Well, Kasztner and the members of the Jewish Council in Hungary, this is absolutely true, knew everything about Auschwitz, and they knew, thanks to you too, thanks to your report. In spite of this, they didn't warn the Jewish population which had been herded in the ghetto before the deportation. And it's true that the Jews boarded the train, but we know that at the same time, Kasztner was engaged in a negotiation with Weissmandel. We know this. What was the aim of this negotiation? He wanted to save at least a part of this Jewish population. And he didn't warn them. My opinion is, and it's very complicated, he didn't warn them precisely because he couldn't talk, and he couldn't talk because he was negotiating, which means that trying to save at least a part of the Jews, he doomed them. This is what I think. I would like your answer about this.
I think this is completely wrong.
Okay.
This is a favorite explanation to whitewash and Weissmandel the whole affair. During the negotiations of Kasztner with the Nazis, the deportation of the Hungarian Jews to an industrialized death went unimpeded, according to the Nazi plans. Therefore, for these negotiations, for the Nazis, was only probably an entertainment, macabre piece of humor. For Kasztner it was different, it was an alibi. Because by sacrificing hundreds of thousands of Jews who believed him, that he would warn them if the death would be imminent, he didn't warn them, and of course had to be paid by Eichmann in some way or another. Eichmann was not so interested in the fate of 1,000 or 2,000 Jews. He was interested in keeping the murder machinery going, even at the price of letting 1,000 or 2,000 Jews go. So it was a piece of a macabre humor to agree with Kasztner for an exchange of a small Jewish community of his own choice. And if we will study who they were, we will find that they consisted of 2 groups or 3 groups of people, which Kasztner chose. One, which were relatives of the Jewish Council. 2, people who had money, especially in foreign accounts. 3, people who were prominent in the Zionist circles. 4, people who were prominent in the Jewish religion. Saving those few, and himself including, provided the small group of traitors with a bit of money, on addition of their lives, and enabled the Nazis to feed the death machinery in an unimpeded way during the month when it was planned. The Nazis would not mind that thousands or 2,000 Jews went, say, to Switzerland, because according to the Nazi ideology, they will win the war. They really believed that they will win the war. And they said, well, with those who escaped now, we will catch up tomorrow. But meanwhile, from the Nazis' point of view, meanwhile, we have to keep our death installations going. So it didn't matter.
You think that the Nazis accepted to negotiate only in order to keep the machinery smoothly going?
Of course. What else could they have done? If Kasztner told them, if you don't agree with what we ask from you, from the Nazis, then we will divulge our information about the nature of Auschwitz to the masses. And the Nazis knew, of course, that if that is the...
I have a more general
Yes.
question. What
Yeah.
do you think of the mere fact to try to negotiate with the Nazis, which happened very often, as well?
Well, the last one who tried to negotiate with the Nazis was Chamberlain. This was in 1939, or 1938, in Munich.
No, we are talking about the Jews now.
But I mean, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. For the Jews, there remained nothing but resistance. There was no way out from dying. The question was how fast to die and with what dignity. And in order to make it fast and shameful, that's what the Nazis needed, the Jewish Council and the rabbis. The big ones, the small ones were gassed. If the Jewish councils and the big rabbis would have told that the fate of the people at the end of the line is death. And they could have told them, as you say, the information was available in the West. And as we know, they had connections with the West. They could write impassioned letters to the West whenever they wanted, obviously. It wasn't so difficult for them to transport
all right. In Poland in 1942 it was much more complicated.
Well, you know.
And there were ghettos and there were Jewish councils in each ghetto.
Yes. You see, for instance, with the Jewish community in Slovakia, where about 1/3 was Orthodox Jews, they would do absolutely what an Orthodox rabbi, the top rabbi, would say them, Weissmandel. They wouldn't obey the Jewish councils, because the Jewish council were Zionists and the Orthodox Jews never liked the Zionism. The very fact...
Weissmandel was not a Zionist.
Not at all. But the Zionists could not influence the Orthodox Jews. And the Zionists, as the Jewish councils, as a tool of the Nazis, had to induce not only the Jewish population in general, but also the Orthodox Jewish group to enter the trains. If the rabbi will tell them, don't enter the trains, but die here, or we don't allow our communities to be disrupted, we don't cooperate, well, they wouldn't go.
Well, what do you think of the negotiations?
So it was necessary for the Zionists, in order to carry out their job, to extend their protection to a part of the prominent Orthodox Jews. And in order to extend this protection, it was necessary to protect in center of Bratislava, 120 miles from a working Auschwitz, a complete yeshiva with the students and with a Wonder Rabbi.
What do you think of the negotiations of Weissmandel with Licheny, with the Nazis?
It's ridiculous.
And they started in 1942.
Well,
we say it's ridiculous. Why?
Well, what was the basis of those negotiations? If you negotiate, both sides go into a negotiation with something to offer. What had Licheny to offer to Weissmandel? Power. What had Weissmandel offered to Licheny? Money. So Wislicenyi's job was to pretend to be interested in that money. The money involved were a relatively small sum with which Weissmandel could be having at his disposal, so small that it was humorous in the eyes of the Nazis, because millions were lying on the floor in Auschwitz. Every prisoner in Auschwitz knew it, every SS member would know it. So they could get that money in a much bigger amount there. Secondly, it was not only money which mattered, but property, real estate. By deporting the Jews from Slovakia to Auschwitz, or from Hungary to Auschwitz, but especially from Slovakia and from other countries, the real estate was not taken with themselves. They didn't take the real estate with them. And the real estate was auctioned in auctions where it was sold for peppercorn prices to the right sort of people. If Wislicenyi wanted a particular house or a particular property, he would go to those auctions where every big Nazi could buy them for peppercorn prices.
Yes, but you know that there are people today, followers of Weissmandel, who said that thanks to these negotiations with Licheny, he succeeded to stop the deportations in Slovakia in 1942.
This is an
no, they say this.
Yes. I mean, the statement is absolutely ridiculous if one looks at it from the point of view of what was happening in Auschwitz in the center of the mechanized death. They look at it from the small angle as they see it, and it is presented to them. For instance, the Nazis never evacuated the whole Jewish population from a particular country at a certain time. Together. They always took only a small part. And then in a year later they took another small part. So that there is never a resistance of the whole endangered group of the population. So we saw in Auschwitz that after French transports of Jews came Slovak transports of Jews. And after Slovak transports of Jews came Polish transports of Jews. And after Polish transports of Jews came Greek transports of Jews. And after Greek transports of Jews came French Jews again. So what we could see in Auschwitz was a continuous factory. But in those individual particular places, it looked as if there would be a lull in deportation. It was not a lull. The Nazis had their limitation. Auschwitz could take only 5,000 a day. I mean, process 5,000 units a day. So, that was a Nazi terminology. And those religious people which you say were saved by Weissmandel, what happened was that while the Nazi machinery was sweeping around the Europe, and the Nazi machinery was not finished with the Jews of the Europe, when the war was finished. The war finished the Nazis before they finished the Jews. And they think that it was Weissmandel who saved them. It was the British, the American, and the Russian armies which defeated the Nazis. That's what saved them.
But
otherwise their time would have come.
All right, but do you doubt the sincerity of Weissmandel when he was dealing with the Nazis?
How could he believe that he can pay off Nazis? I mean, one can imagine a type of a rabbinical folly when a big rabbi thinks that everybody is foolish and he is clever.
New York, Vrba 138.
But do you think that Weissmandel was a madman, fool, megaloman? What do you see?
I am not a judge. I am only a witness. I can only say what I know for sure. And I know for sure what was happening in 1942 and 1944. If Weissmandel has done something wrong, it is not for me to forgive him, but for his God, if there is one. And I don't know. But if you ask me about the whole situation, in my opinion and in my reflection, it looks the following. The Nazis understood certain intricacies of ethnical structures of the people which they subjugated. They were by no means stupid. They were cruel and inhuman and ruthless in an unprecedented way in history. But stupid they were not. And they analyzed certain characters, not only of the Jewish ethnic community as a whole in Europe, but also in its details which were caused by historical development of this community in various countries. The Polish Jewish ethnic community was different from the Slovak in small differences and in many ways similar. Hungarian was different, the German was different, the French was different. It's obvious to me that the Nazis in their thoroughness have studied certain characteristic streaks of those communities and also have studied the personalities within those communities before they could even think of a major plot like an industrialized slaughter of human beings in Auschwitz and in other places. If I do not accept this hypothesis, then I must believe that everything was playing into the hand of Nazis by chance, by accident, and this is not likely. There was a master plan behind it. Now, as far as the Jewish ethnic communities, there is one thing was, and is especially here we see it, among the Jewish ethnic community in America, there appears suddenly in this Jewish community, which was once a carrier of ethics in form of Judaism and later in form of Christianity, there appear, and I'm sorry to say so, there appear signs of degeneration, which are just incredible. For instance, when I look at the American Jews who constantly protest on the streets that the Soviet Jews should go to fight to Palestine, and they don't go there, I mean, I cannot understand that. Now, you see, and nobody sees that there is something wrong with this attitude. This is only a small example. Now, if I go back to the Jewish communities in Europe, let us not forget that these communities were isolated from the rest of the world in ghettos for centuries, and the culture is relatively new, and not each in those Jewish communities is an Einstein or other wonderful Jews of wonderful achievement. The Jewish community has kept certain standards which from an ethical point of view are difficult to understand.
No, but excuse me.
Yes.
I think we are going to
Okay.
I cannot.
Yes, I agree with you. It's a philosophical question, but you asked me that.
No, I ask you if you consider that Weissmandel was a fool or a megaloman or a stupid man. And I asked you before...
He was in a precarious situation, in my opinion.
I asked you before...
the precarious
if you believe,
situation...
in his sincerity or
yes.
not.
He was in a precarious situation.
Because he conceived even a so-called Europa plan in order to save the rule of the European Jews, which was left. This is true and this is a fact. And I ask you, was he at least sincere?
I cannot see into his soul. I can see only one thing. He was in a precarious situation. Because while the Zionists were brooms which Nazis used for sweeping the Jews in the oven in Auschwitz voluntarily, going with little resistance, he was a puppet in the hands of the Zionists. The religious Jews could not contact the Nazis directly. There was never a direct contact between the religious Jews, these extreme Orthodox Jews, and the Nazis. The contact from all the Jews to the Nazis was done through those Judenrats or Judenverrats or whatever you want to call them. Now, these Judenrats or Jewish councils, they, because of their Zionist background, had little influence upon the Orthodox Jewry, must have come to the logical conclusion that it would be good from the Orthodox Jewry to create an aristocracy, which also will get a delay of murder, and then the rest of Orthodox Jews can be induced to a passive boarding of the trains to the slaughterhouse, just like the rest of them. And so once an exception was created, say like Rabbi Weissmandel, with his wife and children and entourage of students, and the school was created in center of Bratislava, so that it should appear that things are basically right. And as long as those Jews were boarding the trains and Rabbi Weissmandel didn't come out from the school and didn't tell them, don't go, you are going to your death, fine, then he has served his purpose.
But you are so severe with these people that you seem to exonerate completely the Nazis.
I do not exonerate the Nazis at all. It should be clear that the Nazis were the murderers. I only tell you that to murder people is not so easy. A crazy murderer, we have seen who is a crazy murderer. A guy in Texas goes up on a university tower and shoots 20 or 15 people, and then he is licked by the police. He's crazy. That's what a crazy person can do, to kill 15, 20 or 50 people, or God knows what. But to kill millions of people on an industrial scale, in a slaughterhouse, reasonably intelligent, reasonably normal people as we see them on the street. Well, no crazy man can do that. Can extinguish the instinct of self-determination given by nature into those people, making them, no crazy man can do that. And once there's Nazis, this inhuman visitation upon this earth, conceived the plan of such a mass murder, they understood that such a plan can be carried out better with the help of traitors.
I just said that they were a very special kind of traitor. They were not traitors in the ordinary sense of the word. I don't think so.
You see,
there were some traitors, yes. Absolutely.
I am not
but at the beginning, these people didn't mean what was at the end. Never.
I am not a rabbi to explain differences and nuances in shades of treason at the expense of your neighbor. I leave this to the big philosophers.
Yes, but I think that you have no nuance in this respect.
I beg your pardon?
I think that you have no nuance in this respect.
Well, I leave that problem to them. It's bigger than for me. A Slovak proverb says that this is a problem for a horse. Because he has got a big head, he can think about it.
Right.
It's too complicated philosophical problem for me to find out nuances of treason.
Why do you smile so often when you talk about this?
I am not aware that I am using that smile so often But
You
what
do.
should I do? Should I cry?
That's the question.
I don't think that crying has helped anybody. But of course, when you tell me, years after the event, that there are some people living in a civilized world and claiming that they are living because Rabbi Weissmandel saves them with his negotiations, well, I can only smile.
I didn't say this. I just asked.
For instance, I'm giving you.
And you smiled a lot of times, not only talking about Rabbi Weissmandel.
I look also nicer when I smile.
I'm not sure.
I hope.